Hi everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. Today's webinar is an overview of the 2020 Office of Community Services Community Economic Development Program, or CED. I want to let you know that this webinar will be recorded and all of you have been muted. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them at any time, and those questions will be answered during the webinar and also at the end of the presentation during the Q&A session. We just want to clarify that everything we cover today during this webinar is NALCAB's opinion, and you can find further details in the CED website. We will be sharing the slides and the recording in a follow-up email. Next slide. So today we will do some brief introductions, then we will go over the CED requirements and eligibility, then we will go over project examples, we will cover changes for this year of 2020, then we'll talk about NALCAB technical assistance, and we will go over the Q&A. So for introductions, my name is Natalia Chavez. I'm program specialist, and we'll have in the line Storm Taliaferro, senior program manager, and Holly Frindell, she's the director of programs. So here is, sorry for the noise, here is a brief introduction of our business model at NALCAB. We do capacity building and leadership development through grant making, technical assistance, training like our national training and webinars, and our Latino Leadership Development Program, which is the Pete Garcia Fellowship. We also do impact investing. We do this through lending and loan purchase to or from members. We also have loan portfolio management and asset management of third-party capital through a subsidiary. And we also do policy and advocacy and field building. We do this through federal policy strategy, member policy capacity building, advisory services, and research. Next slide. So now Storm will be covering all the CED requirements and eligibility.
Thank you, Natalia. Hi, everyone. My name is Storm Taliaferro. I'm a senior program manager here at NALCAB. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about the 2020 CED grant program. The Community Economic Development Grant Program has been critical to the success of many of our members. Since 2009, NALCAB members have raised over $41 million in CED grant funds. Next slide, please. So we're happy to share this information with you about this really unique and essential program. For a quick overview, the Funding Opportunity Announcement, or FOA, as you'll hear me refer to it as, was released just last week, and it is due in 30 days on July 3rd before 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, typically there is a 60-day turnaround period, but due to the COVID pandemic related delays and the assistance that the Office of Community Services was extending to current grantees, this funding opportunity announcement was released later, and there is only a 30-day turnaround. So we are bringing this webinar to you as quickly as possible. The FOA stated that there are expected to be about 17 awards. The minimum award size is $100,000. Maximum is $800,000. The average projected award size is $750,000 for a total program funding amount of $13.6 million. There is no match requirement, and the anticipated project start dates is September 30th, 2020. Okay, the CED program goals. The purpose of the CED program is to create business and employment opportunities that will result in new full-time permanent job positions for low-income individuals and thereby lead to increased self-sufficiency. CED CED projects must be ready to implement, contribute to the livelihood of the community, and be able to attract additional public and private investments for the communities they serve, in addition to leading to increased self-sufficiency for low-income individuals. This year, low-income individuals in the FOA is defined as 200% of the HHS poverty guidelines. This is only for the fiscal year 2020 FOA. In past years, that low-income definition has been 125%. But due to the CARES Act and for the purposes of this FOA, low income means 200% of the poverty guidelines. Next slide, please. Eligible applicants. So to be eligible to apply, you must meet the following definition of a qualified community development corporation as found in the FOA. Please note that the CDC designation doesn't need to be specified on any documents as long as these three conditions are met. Your organization must be a private 501c3 that has articles of incorporation or bylaws showing that your principal purpose is the planning, developing, and managing of economic development activities or low-income housing. Your board must include community residents, business leaders, and civic leaders. So, so you do not need to be a designated CDC, but you do need to meet all three of those requirements to meet the definition of a CDC and be eligible to apply. Next slide, please. Okay, required experience. Applicants will need to document experience with 2 business creation or expansion projects within the last 10 years that are substantially similar to the proposed project. They have to also be job creation projects where full-time, full-year positions were created, and the positions should be permanent and lasting 1 year beyond the project period. If you lack that experience, you may also apply with a more experienced partner to help guide in various portions of the project and to meet that experience requirement. You would need to set up a partner agreement and to demonstrate that and include that in the appendix of your proposal. And for the positions, when you speak about the positions that were created in your past projects, you'll need to include quantitative and qualitative descriptions for what was created, including wages, benefits, and if applicable, how those persons left public assistance programs, and refer to really the long-term sustainability of the positions. Okay, next slide. A little bit more on the more experienced partner. So the experienced partner will have to have at least 2 past CED projects of similar size and scope, and an experience with collaborative programming. So now the CED projects here, this is another acronym that you should not get tripped up on. You do not, this is CED here is not referring to CED grant projects, but community economic development projects more broadly. Okay, so if that partner meets the definition on the previous slide of a community development corporation and has experience within the last 10 years with a project of similar size and scope, creating full-time, full-year positions that lasted for more than 1 year beyond the project period. You can include those qualitative and quantitative descriptions, as I noted on the previous slide. and include an agreement in the appendix, and you should be good to go. You'll need to provide, evidence of a workable and strategic arrangement with this more experienced partner to provide whatever sort of assistance is best, whether it's administrative, technical, or financial TA to ensure the success of the project. Okay, eligible service areas. Eligible service areas, the unemployment and poverty rates must be equal to or higher the state and national levels for unemployment and poverty. So that information can be easily found on the U.S. Census Bureau's website as one source. All right, next slide, please. Eligible uses. CED funds may be used to support the creation of positions that can be filled by low-income individuals through the startup or expansion of activities of participating businesses. The grant funds can also be used for startup capital for operating expenses of those participating businesses. And these are expenses that will be replaced by projected earnings during the award period. Eligible project strategies to support these participating businesses include equity investments in the participating business or in a grantee's for-profit subsidiary, loans, and these loans have to be at or below market rate. Repayment must begin during the funding project period. No balloon payments are allowed. Loans cannot be forgiven, nor can any funding be gifted or used as a sub-grant. Another project strategy is property purchase, construction, or renovation, including commercial development, hard and soft costs, and limited incubator development. So wherein the incubator will support participating businesses with the financial capacity to create these new full-time jobs. CED funds have funded a variety of projects due to this flexibility of eligible uses. So we've seen business incubators, subsidiary creation, farmers markets, shopping centers, agricultural initiatives, and manufacturing facilities. So keep an open mind when you're thinking of projects. All right, ineligible activities. CED awards cannot be used to reimburse pre-award costs, such as paying a grant writer. It cannot be used for sub-awards or pass-through grants. It cannot be used to capitalize your loan loss reserve fund, to make loans with balloon payments. Now, this is a change from the fiscal year 2019 FOA. It used to be the case that balloon payments after the grant period were the only ineligible activity regarding balloon payments. But now, please note, says no balloon payments at all for fiscal year 2020 projects. All right, repayments of all loans must begin during the grant period, and no portion of a loan is forgivable. Let's see, other ineligible activities, the creation and expansion of microenterprise business training or TA centers. Projects focus primarily on job training, job placement, or technical assistance. And finally, projects that do not create new jobs. And a quick note here, for the fiscal year 2020 FOA, job creation now is able to include efforts for the recreation and restoration of full-time, full-year positions that were lost due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So please keep that qualification in mind. They've given us some flexibility there.
Hey, Storm, this is Holly. I have a quick question. When you say micro enterprise business training or TA centers are not eligible, does that mean that activity is not eligible at all with this grant, or it just can't be a primary part of it?
So it's really referring to the expansion or construction of purely micro enterprise business training or technical assistance centers. So, for instance, a technical assistance obviously is critical to each project's success. The businesses that are supported will need technical assistance, but it cannot be the primary focus of the grant. The primary focus has to be on assisting the businesses themselves. So I hope that clarifies. If there's any further clarification needed, please ask, or please just enter it into the Q&A or chat box on the screen in WebEx.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about job creation components. So the following components should be present in the new jobs created by your project. The jobs must be new. Now that's with the qualification for fiscal year 2020 about the recreation and restoration of certain jobs. So they have to be new, full-time, full year, sustainable, with wages and benefits that address the individual's barriers to self-sufficiency, and 75% of the jobs must go to low-income individuals. It's important to note that you should not aggregate full-time equivalent hours in your job counts, and also that temporary construction jobs do not count towards the job creation total. Also, these positions must be sustainable for at least 1 year past the grant period, and you'll need to demonstrate that. In terms of self-sufficiency, that really means competitive starting wages, wage growth opportunities, and employee benefits. So you'll need to specify what level of opportunities, benefits, and wages for each job that is going to be created. And finally, keep in mind that low income here for this FOA means 200% of the poverty guidelines. Next slide. In order to show how you'll be reaching low-income populations effectively, you'll need to demonstrate that you have a viable recruitment and tracking strategy in place. You'll have to have signed agreements with a partner public agency or social service provider who will refer low-income individuals, and you'll need to have those countersigned agreements in place. And you can utilize public assistance programs, child support enforcement agencies, TANF programs, and other one-stop career centers and employment, education, and training programs. These referrals will also need to be documented if those individuals are indeed hired. You will also have to document those individuals who, for the job positions that are created that were not referred. So, so keep in mind that you will need to maintain this documentation on low-income individuals. We'll revisit that a little bit later in the presentation. Okay, let's talk about the types of projects. The projects are categorized as either construction or non-construction. So please note there is also another change here from last year's FOA which stated that if there were 250,000 or 25% of the direct cost of the project going towards construction, alteration, or renovation of the property, that would be considered a construction project. So this year it has changed. This year, a project that has more than 150,000 in property construction, alteration, or renovation is considered construction. The property in question is typically used or leased by the participating businesses, and construction projects last 5 years. Now, non-construction projects are projects that have $150,000 or less in construction, alteration, and or renovation of the property. And these projects tend to utilize grant funds to support the participating businesses, primarily through loan or equity investments. Now, construction projects are also eligible to incorporate loan and equity investment strategies, but non-construction projects use these as their primary strategy. Non-construction projects are 3 years long, and again, construction projects are 5 years long. So the type of project factors into the calculation of the grant's job creation requirements. So for the jobs equation, to calculate the minimum number of full-time permanent jobs your CED project must create, divide the total grant request by the cost per position. So for construction projects, that cost per position is $25,000, while for non-construction projects, it's $20,000. Now, keep in mind, we highly caution against overpromising on jobs when projecting the number of jobs to be created. It is much better to outperform on your deliverables after you have the grant in hand, rather than to have set the bar too high and fall short. So in practice, what this looks like is, so for construction projects, grant period is 5 years. For a project grant of $800,000, 32 jobs will need to be created. For a $600,000 project, 24 jobs will need to be created, and so on. Now, for construction projects, keep in mind that by the beginning of the grant period, the construction project must be ready to be implemented. And you can demonstrate that through financial plans that show all of the hard and soft costs. And also keep in mind the construction must be completed by the end of the assigned project period. Again, short-term construction jobs are not counted towards the job creation requirement, only the full-time, full-year positions. And for construction projects only, a budget narrative describing the incremental expenditures of CED funds for implementation must be provided and tied to the project milestones. Finally, if CED funding is used for land purchase or hard costs in construction and renovation, a lien in the form of a notice of federal interest is required against the property. Okay, for non-construction projects, the cost per position is lower, $20,000. Non-construction projects are those, again, that spend $150,000 or less on construction, alteration, or renovation of property over a 3-year grant period. So for non-construction project grant of $800,000, 40 jobs will need to be created. For a $600,000 project, 30 jobs will need to be created, and so on.
Storm, we
Yes.
have a question. It says, does supporting development of cooperative qualify under job creations?
Let's see, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. Does supporting development of co-ops, cooperative, qualify under job creations?
Let's see. I haven't seen I haven't seen any cooperative projects, but that does not mean that it's not possible. If this is a cooperative where you can clearly demonstrate that by supporting this cooperative, there will be job creation, and you can show the positions that are going to be created along with the wages and benefits, and you can demonstrate that whatever business that this cooperative is operating in is that it's going to perform well over the grant period, then I do believe that that is an eligible an eligible strategy. You would need to have a a memorandum of understanding in place with the owners of the cooperative, demonstrating that they're committed to to creating these jobs for low-income individuals, and that they understand the reporting requirements around job creation and benefits. But in my mind, I see that just as being structured as with any other business, and therefore eligible for either a loan investment or equity investment. And if that person has further questions, they can follow up with us after the webinar. Okay, so CED projects need to be ready to implement at the time of funding. A part of demonstrating that readiness is that the applicant or that the participating business has control of the site and our facilities required to operate the project, and that this site control is conditioned only upon the receipt of the grant award. So this year's FOA calls for a greater level of detail on facilities and real properties, as shown on page 41 of the FOA. In the budget justification section, any properties that will be used during the project period will need to be listed, and as will costs that will be charged to the grant for these properties, and it will have to be noted if it's a direct cost or an indirect cost. Properties will need to be organized into three categories: owned, leased, and intent to lease. So lease being with the current lease in place, or intent to lease. That means that either a letter of intent or draft or unsigned lease is provided. If a lease has not been executed prior to the submission of the application, the applicant must submit an actual draft of the unsigned lease, demonstrating that highlighting the arrangement, including the address, terms, lengths, and proposed expenses. Now, the applicant must specify, within these categories, whether this arrangement, whether it's owned, lease, or intent to lease, is arm's length or less than arm's length, and detail how the costs are calculated, depreciated, and allocated. So an arm's length agreement is with an unrelated third party, and I highly recommend that you read carefully the definitions section for arm's length, and carefully review on page 41 these newer requirements around the level of detail on the facilities that you'll need to provide. Okay, so that's a lot of information. Let's look on 3 past successful CED projects from within the NALCAB network, and hopefully this will help pull it all together for you. We're going to look at a revolving loan project, an equity investment project, and a public market and commercial kitchen project. Okay, in this first example, a community organization used a CD fund to capitalize the revolving loan fund. They made loans of up to $70,000 over a 3-year term and were able to help 4 small businesses expand, thereby creating 15 jobs. The loans they made were at 6%, which at the time was below market rate. Obviously, rates are much lower these days, but this was a number of years ago. They targeted support for minority-owned businesses and were able to partner with another organization to provide ESL classes for the business's new hires. Let's see. Again, this was a non-construction project, so it was a $20,000 cost per job. This organization was able to demonstrate that they had sufficient experience through past CDBG block grants and other projects of similar size and scope. They used a workforce partner to refer low-income individuals. And this organization then went on to be awarded CD projects in years after this 2014 award. Next slide, please. So that's just one example of how the CED program can be a real launching pad to leverage and access greater federal assistance. Okay, let's look at an equity investment project quickly. This second example is of an organization that used CED funds to invest in 2 third-party businesses. One was a food manufacturer that needed funds to purchase manufacturing equipment and to support increased marketing for its products. The other company was a growing apparel manufacturer that needed to move into a larger location to accommodate increased demand and just expand capacity for its clothing line. As a result of this CED award and investment, 40 full-time sustainable jobs were created. These were permanent jobs. This particular CED grantee had a history of conducting similar projects, and they were able to demonstrate that with previous OCS CED grants and EDA awards. It was a non-construction project where the cost was $20,000 per job. They also used a workforce partner to refer low-income individuals, and they obtained letters of support from local officials that really detailed the officials' knowledge of the CDC's experience and mission and commitment to the proposed project. All right, next slide, please. Okay, finally, this third example is for a successful construction project of a public market and commercial kitchen. This CDC received a little under $800,000 to create, oh, I'm sorry, actually it's $800,000 to create a public market and commercial kitchen by which 47 jobs were created. Now here they, well exceeded the minimum number of jobs for a construction project of $800,000, which is 32 jobs. The project involved a great deal of planning, 19 different partnerships, and leveraged several funding resources, thereby ultimately yielding just a very successful project that has increased employment opportunities and access to healthy foods for their community. They were able to demonstrate their experience through management of LIHTC home and CDBG projects, and through their history of developing and managing affordable housing. Okay, so we can touch on some bonus points here. There's a maximum of 10 bonus points available this year, with a maximum of 2 points for each of the following categories. Alignment with Opportunity Zones Initiative, alignment with Current Promise Zones Initiative, and I'll backtrack a little bit. For the Opportunity Zones Initiative, the application must provide a signed letter of support documenting the extent of involvement and collaboration with any partners, clearly outlining roles and responsibility and any support or resources provided. So keep that in mind. Let's see, in considering the award of bonus points, reviewers will take into a consideration also for the promise zone, the extent to which the project is aligned with the Promise Zone initiative. More bonus points are awarded for rural communities with high rates of poverty, unemployment, or substance use disorder. Also bonus points for counties with persistent poverty. Please see the list in the FOA. There's a very specific list of those eligible counties that are eligible for those bonus points around persistent poverty. And also 2 bonus points are available for states or territories that do not currently have an active CED grant. Let's take a look at those on this slide here. And this list is also in the FOA, but we have it for you here to take a quick look at. Okay, next slide, please. We'll talk about changes for the fiscal year 2020. So, as I already noted, so recreation or restoration of full-time, full-year positions that were lost due to the COVID-19 pandemic will count towards the job creation total. Another change that we see in this year's FOA is the definition of low income, right? It's 200% of the poverty guidelines. The construction project definition has changed. It went from $250,000 or 25% of the direct cost. That's been modified now. Construction projects are now have more than $150,000 of costs in construction and renovation, et cetera. No balloon payments are allowed for loans whatsoever. There's a higher level of requirements on the facilities cost delineation, and you'll need to get very specific on that in the budget narrative. Let's see, components of the application have moved around a little bit from previous years. So please take a close look at the FOA, and you'll see that different sections of the business plan have moved around a little bit, but they're materially the same, just in a slightly different order. And finally, there are no bonus points this year as there were last year for projects in areas where there was a disaster declaration, projects that have alignment with financial literacy initiatives, and projects in alignment with choice neighborhoods. Okay, some best practices. So if you're going to do a loan project, I highly recommend that you have a pipeline of loans and refer to that. Since the projects have to be ready to implement, the business circumstances change, and they particularly change in 2020's market. So if one loan happens to fall through, not happen, not materialize, if you have a pipeline, you can move quickly to communicate with OCS that you have another eligible business when it comes time to sign the grant contract in the fall. All right. Another thing to keep in mind is that you will need to track the number of low-income individuals and that verification of low-income status for the grant. Now, if you're awarded, OCS can give you additional guidance on this. But keep in mind, are all of the new hires being referred to you through a social service provider that does that verification for you? So really think through how you're going to have that done. And another best practice is really just creating a solid plan to track job creation. Tracking jobs can be a bit of a struggle for grantees, particularly if you are supporting, say, 5 participating businesses. So lay the groundwork so that your businesses will regularly communicate with you about the job creation, the types of benefits available, raises, promotions, etc., because you will need to submit a performance progress report every 6 months in addition to a final report. So just make sure you have good communication with the businesses and consider incorporating into your partner agreements with the businesses, your letters of intent or memorandums of understanding, that they will regularly report these job creations and benefits going forward. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so you've seen all of these slides. You're considering applying for this year. What are your next steps? If you don't have a DUNS number yet, obtain one right away. Now, typically in a non-COVID environment, this can take 1 to 2 days. And so really do this today, tomorrow. Next is make sure your SAM registration is active. OCS is typically recommends that you allow at least 10 business days after you submit your SAM registration for it to become active. So if you are not registered in the systems of award management, do that as soon as possible. And because you'll need, after those 10, 11 business days, you'll need an additional 24 hours before that registration is available across other government systems, including grants.gov. Now, keep in mind, the Administration for Children and Families is temporarily relaxing the requirement around active SAM registration at the time of application in efforts to expeditiously issue funding. So current registrants in SAM with active registrations expiring before May 16th are being afforded a one-time extension of 60 days. Applicants not currently registered in SAM, again, are strongly encouraged to register as soon as possible, but really at least 10, 11 days prior to the due date of the funding opportunity. You'll note in grants.gov that it says that if there's an insufficient amount of time to complete the registration process before the funding opportunity due date, to contact grants.gov for assistance. But I really suggest that you don't take a roll of the dice, that you try to get this all squared away. Make sure that your SAM registration is active. Make sure you have the correct login emails and passwords, because we have seen groups trip up on this in the past, and it's very trying to put in so many hours and collaborate with so many partners to really not be able to submit. All right, you'll need to create a grants.gov account if you do not have one. business days at least. So, and you'll need to authorize your grants.gov rules so that the appropriate staff can actually submit that grant. So really, if you're even considering applying, please check on all of these registrations, and check out ACF's Register and Get Ready webpage, and for additional information and details on completing these preliminary steps. You'll want to, another good first step is just getting that documentation of board support from your board. That can be minutes of a recent meeting. You can look in the FOA for other ways to document board support, but that's something that can also take a little time, and I would get on that right away. Next, sit down and map out what you need from whom. Request letters of support from your senators, congressmen, elected officials, partner organizations. Request the business plans, financials, job descriptions, benefits, salaries, etc. Line those up from the businesses right now, and examine those financials and make sure they really demonstrate the growth that will be needed to support these the number of job positions that are being created, and also follow the FOA carefully, and make sure that your agreements are countersigned where applicable. Again, you don't want to go through all of the trouble of having reached out and made agreements to not follow the letter of the FOA. So read the FOA carefully and get those agreements signed and letters of support requests right now, because it does take some time. Okay, next slide. All right, what are some resources? The OCS website has a prospective grantee resources that we recommend. The ACF How to Apply for a Grant link is also here. Again, these slides will be emailed to all attendees. The OCS Apply for a CED grant link is also very helpful. OCS, I believe it was just yesterday, released their pre-recorded pre-application presentation. So you can click the link to go look at that. You can also continue to check the CED website for Q&A that they will be posting and updating, I believe, through the grant deadline of July 3rd. Let's see, finally, there's this really great toolkit that was developed by the Community Action Partnership. It actually features a number of projects, including one NALCAB member, Fresno CDFI, Access Plus, also called Access Plus Capital. And so you'll see, best practices, a number of projects in good detail, and lessons learned. So that'll give you a greater idea of what is eligible and what's been successful. All right, next slide. Okay, content resources. There's also a great CED has a great summary abstract tool. Prosperity Now scorecard has some very useful information. It's a great source for data. U.S. Census Bureau's advanced search is also very helpful. The Occupational Outlook Handbook from the Department of Labor is particularly useful as you're talking about the sustainability of the positions that are going to be created. We also like the MIT Living Wage Calculator, and And then, of course, there's the NALCAB 2020 CED templates guide that's available for members, and you can request that through the survey link. Okay, next slide. Again, the slides will be emailed to all attendees. Everyone can take the survey. Members through the survey can request the template guide, strategy call, and letter of support. We ask that you request the letter of support by June 22nd. We'll make every effort to answer all of your questions and support support you with strategy calls. Let's see, given the tight turnaround of 30 days, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but we're here to support you and we'll do our best. So please, request assistance as soon as possible, and we'll get you into our schedule. You can also email your questions to cedinfo@nalcab.org. So that is the technical assistance NALCAB is providing around the CED grant this year. We'll now open it up to questions from attendees.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Storm. So we have a lot of questions. So let's get started. The first one is, can it be used for loans intended to replace payday loans, like consumer loans?
Okay, so if a business, if you demonstrate that the loan is going to be utilized to help the business grow and expand, then restructuring debt like that would be eligible, but you would really need to demonstrate how that cost savings is going to be substantial enough to support the business's growth and generate, enough growth to support the creation of full-time job positions.
Thank you. So the next question is, how does ineligible TA vary from TA provided in something like a business incubator?
Right, business incubators, it can provide TA, but the whole purpose of the grant is to fund and support business creation and expansion. And so OCS's view on this is that TA alone does not generate jobs. It's really the businesses that demonstrate jobs. So you really need to specify, within an incubator, which businesses are going to benefit, which businesses are going to be participating in your application, and thus generating the jobs. So you can state that you're going to give loan assistance or an equity investment to a business, or perhaps support them through purchasing a building or providing them with a lease or what have you, but and providing additional TA to make sure that that business is successful. But the TA really isn't the crux of the argument and the critical portion of the project. It is that business's expansion and how those CED funds are helping that organization to expand in order to create jobs for low-income individuals.
Okay, the next question is, does your CED partner with CED experience have to be a nonprofit as well?
Yes, so that's correct. So it has to be the more experienced partner has to meet the definitions of a CDC, which includes being a private nonprofit, a private 501c3 nonprofit, with the principal purposes of planning, developing, or managing low-income housing or community economic development activities, and then have that tripartite board representation from residents, business leaders, and civic leaders. So if the more experienced partner meets those three requirements, then and in addition to having a history of 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 working with it has two projects of similar size and scope, and also has a history of such strategic partnerships, then that group is eligible as a more experienced partner.
Does the civic leader mean a government employee?
That's an interesting question. Let's see, I would look in the definitions, but I'm not certain. I will check that now. But I recommend. I don't think it needs to be a government employee. It could be a civic employee. But I haven't heard of that, specifically as a requirement. And as I look in the definitions, it's not specifically spelled out. What I would do is I would ask OCS through the online Q&A for their pre-application presentation. But I haven't heard that it needs to be a government employee. I haven't seen that in my experience.
So if you apply with a partner, so that partner cannot be a credit union 501c14?
The definition says 501c3, and so I would stick to that. If the if this particular group wants to make that ask of OCS, they can through OCS's online Q&A, but the definition of a more experienced partner is that it's a 501c3.
And a similar question to that, just to clarify, can the CD partner be a national partner who meets all of the criteria?
So yes, I recommend that folks read the FOA carefully, and in terms of the definitions, but there isn't a restriction in terms of the location of the partner. We've seen more experienced partners, have projects of similar size and scope, but that have been able to partner from afar, and through site visits and conference calls, really been able to execute the strategy of the project very well. So location should not be an issue of the grantee versus the more experienced partner.
That's all the questions we have so far. I know we have only 1 minute, so Storm, just go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you.
Okay. Again, you can take the survey, and it's a very, very brief survey, and request CED templates and a strategy call with us. You know, we'll be emailing the slides around. Please stay in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. And really, thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you for your interest in this program. Keep up the good work, and feel free to reach out to us at NALCAB at cedinfo@nalcab.org if you require additional assistance. We'll be emailing the survey. We'll be emailing the slides and the link to the survey just after this webinar. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.